Welcome there once more to Film Crack. I am Bermuda Schwartz. Over there is my regular co-host,
Nick.
and we have a special guest lined up. Uh, who are you, sir? What are you doing here?
I am Matt from Osaka, and I'm here to talk about movies and drink coffee
Nice.
in that order.
So, for a bit of background, we should say that Matt isn't just Matt from Osaka. Matt is also, well, a lot of things. But used to be the guy who wrote Exile Osaka Zine, right?
Yes, a
Music scene.
zine in the 90s covering underground music in Osaka and a bunch of other things. I sold it for $3 now. Other people sell it for like $30 on eBay. So, but it's vintage now.
Yeah.
It's vintage. So, but that was the goal. I wanted it, I just like if I don't care how many copies I sell, as long as one day some collector has it in a plastic bag, I'm happy,
Acid-free bag with the
Yeah. That's all I
backing
want.
board.
That's all I want. Even one person, that would have been enough.
Dreams
But then
can come
after that,
true.
then after that, I wrote for the Kansai Timeout, and I had a column called Hollywood Japan File that introduced movies shot in Japan from some from a lot from the Japanese right after the during and after the Japanese occupation. So I became obsessed with finding these movies, because I had a list, and this is before YouTube. So I had to hire a video detective to track down all these films because they were in the hands of collectors. And I guess for a fee, they would dub a VHS for you. So I still remember getting reading about all these films and then getting them in the mail, and finally be able to see them. Now, of course, you just go on YouTube and you could see all of these films. But at the time, there was no way to see any of these. So the column ran for about, I think, 7 or 8 years. And now I have all the articles up on the internet. So if you Google Hollywood Japan File, you'll get to read all the articles.
Well, I'll put a link under the video, and also I'll put, there's quite a good primer for it as well, because you wrote an article for the now sadly defunct Midnight Eye website.
Oh, yes.
Which was like
that was a great
primer,
article.
some of the best of. So I'll put a link up to that as well, because I think it's a good starting point.
Yeah.
But going back just briefly, just to, because Matt also writes now for Osaka.com, right? You write column about stuff to do in Osaka, kind of off the beaten path. Your speciality is like, I guess, old kisatens and dive bars and kind of stuff.
Anything with like an old sign or, not the usual Japan is living in the year 2050 types things that people post, like jiggly cheesecake and all that. So I try to capture like a different side of Osaka, basically things I'm interested in.
And I would highly recommend it as well, because I've always liked Matt's writing style, and it's that kind of style which is deceptively looks easy. Do you know what I mean? Because it's not frilly or anything. It's kind of just the facts, ma'am, kind of writing. And I think people assume that that's easy to do because it's easy to read, but I don't think that's the case. So I always enjoy reading Matt's stuff. And to go back to Exile Osaka stuff as well, there was a lot of good stuff in there, but the one thing I always thought was I thought was a monumental task that you pulled off and was fascinating was I can't remember, it ran for quite a few pages, and it was basically documenting all of the Boredom's side projects.
Right, yeah.
There was a lot of them.
Yes, I found a person who's a good friend to this day, Dave Watson. So there was this guy in Canada, and he started the the page, but I'm like, you don't have everything. And then you realize there's like so much. It was a matter of like getting all this information. But then years later, you found out, most of these projects were done at the same recording session, and they
Right.
just used a different name. But it's funny at the time because the singer of the Boredoms, Yamatsuka Ai, he says the most important thing is you have the band name and then the artwork. Then the music comes. So he
Nice.
had like all these crazy names, but the weird thing was you felt like I have to go see this band because I haven't seen them yet. But it's the same band that played
Right.
like last month, but
Just-
it had a cool name,
No,
like
he's a
Concrete
smart cookie.
Octopus.
Yeah, he's a smart cookie that, and it's funny as well. If you think like, I mean, it runs really deep as well. That like, if you think you're hip because you have the DC Car House and MC Hell Shit LP, no, 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 no. There's
Yeah.
names there which are just like you've never heard because they probably only played like a gig or maybe put out a cassette
Yeah.
or something, right? But that article
Well,
is really interesting. I enjoy rereading that.
yeah, because I think back in the 90s, every other person had a record label and they needed
Right.
to release stuff. It's like now who has a record label? People who are serious about putting out music. But back in the 90s, you had a fanzine and then that led to a record label. Oh, I'm a label owner now. And obviously some of them became quite big, Drag City and whatnot. But that was just, you needed a split 7-inch. So who else to ask the Boredoms members with their 100 different bands, and there's always going to be the collectors. I don't have this one yet, Yellow House or whatever it was. So it was a fun time doing it.
Do you still
Yeah.
have your collection of 7 inches and cassettes and stuff?
Some things, a lot of it I sold over the years, I figure that I'm not going to listen to a lot of it and let someone else enjoy it. But the basic albums I kept, but just probably sold that MC Hell Shit. uh,
I like that
probably sold
record.
it.
I do
Yeah,
too. Yes. Yeah.
yeah.
Um, do you- is there um just before we get off this because it's just a fascinating topic for me. Is is there still as vibrant an underground scene now as there was then? Do you think?
Well, in terms of live music, there are shows every night, and surprisingly, it seems like there are more live houses. Like you
Wow.
start to wonder how they start to survive. But the thing that I noticed is the legendary bands, let's say when they play a show back in the 90s, that one band would attract the whole, the whole venue. Now you kind of have to get like 2 or 3 at the same lineup. So let's say it's like Guitar Wolf, Milk Banana, and it'll be like maybe 2 other bands. Whereas like back in the day, those bands could have headlined a show. And even to this day, overseas, like Guitar Wolf's playing New Zealand, Australia, they're selling, they're headlining.
Right.
But now it's like I noticed the crowds are getting a little bit older. So at the last Guitar Wolf, the guy tried to jump into, stage dive, but there were, barely enough people to hold him up. They were getting older. So it's like, oh, you got to take into account that 30 years has passed. A lot of the fans are,
And
not as
Seiji,
sprightly as they once were.
I think Seiji himself had some pretty serious back issues some
Yeah,
years
yeah,
ago.
yeah, yeah.
But maybe
But
he
man,
shouldn't
I
be.
saw, yeah, yeah. I saw them last month, and it was a small club. They put 200% in, and and they had like 5 shows in a row. So, you could tell by the end of the day, end of the show, they were just exhausted, absolutely exhausted. But I'm sure the next day they did the
Dimmer
same
Frame
thing,
Wolf.
but they just played a school in New Zealand, and usually he chugs a beer, so he chugged a glass of milk, and he was doing like instead of kick out the jams, mother effer, it was kick out the jams, mother like. So it made it all PG.
Sweet.
But yeah, that was great. Like that school, kudos to them for hosting Guitar Wolf during the
I
day.
was lucky enough to see them in, I think, 2000 or 2001, about not that long before I moved to Japan, but they came supporting the Cramps, and they played
Wow.
in Vancouver, and it was just, so we went all excited to see the Cramps, obviously, and by the time Guitar Wolf set was over, I was like, I don't need to stay and see the Cramps. We did because it was,
Yeah.
but I really didn't need to because I was shaken by the intensity.
Yeah.
It was absolutely like it was one of the very best shows I've ever been to.
Yeah. I think one thing that's unique about them is like their hero, like most people go like Ramones or let's say Six Pistols, it was always Joan Jett, like
Yes.
putting and like you never really had that situation where a male band, exalted, like this is our influence
Hmm.
of this rock and roll goddess.
Yeah.
They never swayed from that. And I think there is like an interview online where they finally met Joan Jett. Joan Jett knew who they were.
Hmm.
But that was I think great about them that Joan Jett was always the biggest influence, bar none,
Hmm.
for
It
them.
reminds me of how Helen Love eventually ended up actually playing with Joey Ramone, right? After years of
Yeah.
kind of do you think there's anyone either in Japanese or in English now, and maybe I suppose it would be a blog or something now. Do you think there's anyone documenting all the shit
Oh,
going
definitely,
on now?
without question. Probably more than ever, and in a really great way. Like when I went to see a show, like I saw the Adolescents, they a band from California, but you see, like there's really, other foreign people, the next generation, boy, they're really like into it. And it's like you see on the social media, I can't make friends in Japan. It's so hard. Well, you have to go to
Hmm.
places where people have mutual interest, right? And they are definitely going down and getting, making friends with all the bands, and you could see like documenting it. So I think especially in Tokyo, the garage scene, there's at least 3 or 4 documentaries uh that people who have lived here have made. And I watched the Teen Generate documentary. That
Oh
was
yeah,
great.
yeah.
You see like the fans. So when I come up to Tokyo, one of the goals is to go to the Poor Cow, which is the bar from by Fifi of Teen Generate.
Oh,
And
okay.
yeah, and now it's like rock and roll. It's almost like uh what the Hard Rock Cafe used to be like. That was for tourists, but this is like the real rock and roll. Like when visiting bands come or rock and roll fans come, they make a pilgrimage now
All right.
to the Poor
Cool.
Cow.
Do you know where that
And
is?
that's right next to my capsule hotel. That's where I booked the capsule
Ah,
hotel in
okay, okay.
Kitazawa. Yeah,
Shimokitazawa.
just it's
Right,
like
right.
I saw it 3 minutes away, so from the Poor Cow, so I could just wander there anytime.
Awesome.
And they
Yeah,
put on
but
shows as well.
they have, it's like small. They do have shows there, but it's like DJ. And then when you go in there, you have to make your list of 10 best songs and 10 best albums. You have to handwrite it.
Wow.
And then they put you on like Instagram. But I saw them, not Teen Zero, but Firestarter. Like I watched the documentary, and then they came to Osaka, and they're like 60, both the brothers, Fifi and Fink.
Huh.
That was an incredible show. Oh man. I mean,
They're a fun
it was
band.
just, oh man, unbelievable. But yeah, I think, as far as like ambassadors, like with the soft influence, these bands, or even like they did so much, to just bring people together. Because did you see like, now probably people abroad have like a bigger understanding of Japan
Hmm.
more than let's say 20 or 30 years ago, when like you know, people would have all those stereotypes, you know, the Fujiyama geisha, and
right.
everything was weird. And so the writer for the Los Angeles Times, he came to Tokyo for the baseball game, you know, the Dodgers, and he made this video like where he was just an idiot. Oh, look, chopsticks. You could stab your food with it. And he's like, octopus. Oh, no, thank you. So he's doing all this, right? And just being obnoxious. Like, who would want to eat this stuff? Like that attitude that was prevalent from the, but it wasn't Japanese people who got upset. It was the American readers. Like, you're a fool. It's like Japan is not like this. Right. And you're making a mockery of the culture. So, but that was a prevalent attitude, even like with Japanese rock and roll. It was like, you know, how dare they play our rock and roll? Or at the best, it was like a novelty.
Right.
So, yeah.
Right. Clearly, he wasn't aware of the legendary John Peel session where US Maple played with Melt Banana.
Yeah. So
off
it was
his radar.
like, you know, there's still that people who have that old mindset. Oh, chopsticks. No, thank you. Raw fish, not my kind of food. Give me a cheeseburger. And it's dismissive, you know, whereas like the younger generation is like, granddad, you know, enough with that, you know. You know, we've been here, and it's not like that, but very, very like typical, you know, which probably leads into karate hand.
Yes,
of death,
I was going to say
because
that's
Joel
kind of a good
Holt
segue.
would be like that type of person.
Because, so, well, I'd say yes and no. We'll get into it, but in some ways, this is kind of a bit more progressive for its time than I was thinking.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
So anyway, introduce us. So. Yeah, so this is our main film we're going to talk about, because I know Matt's a long-term fan of this film, and then figured out that Joel Holt directed another film. We took a look at that as well. All of Me, but yeah, let's kick off with what is Karate Hand of Death, and where?
Okay, so Karate Hand of Death. Before I'll get into before I bring up the big reveal, which I told you, I researched it a little more.
Oh, okay, interesting.
This was a 1961 film, and it was the first martial arts film to ever, you know, it's documented. It's pretty much introduced karate on film. Obviously wasn't a big success at the time, but I guess when Something Weird started releasing all the videos, you know, it found a new audience. So it seemed like Joel Holt, I think he was like a radio, he might have been his background in radio, and he made these documentaries, and I think he figured out a way, like, I'll film a documentary and then I'll make a narrative around it. So I think my guess, his original plan, like, I'm gonna film, like, go to the Karate Association and film, you know, they're going to explain it in English, and we're going to film it and introduce that on a documentary level. That's what I always assumed.
Yeah.
And then, you know, create a narrative around it with like Nazis and a coin with microfilm, and
it's an odd plot.
It's an odd plot.
Yeah, all this kind of the missing platinum, and
you could see, like, but a lot of, like, when we get into the next film, you could see like he probably had some footage, and then like, oh, how can I expand this into a narrative? You know, so in a way, he kind of maybe pioneered that style. Like not the mockumentary, but using actual people.
Right.
Yeah. You know, just taking a documentary and then shooting around it.
Right.
Like, I'm sure the people.
As for the karate thing, though, I was just wondering, obviously, this is probably the first to center around it, but I can't remember. Was there any like karate in like House of Bamboo or something like that?
There was probably some martial arts type, you know, things, but I think as far as like introducing the sport as Japanese, maybe, because it was always thought that, you know, it was from Hong Kong or whatnot. So I think it was a push to introduce karate as a Japanese sport,
Mhm.
you know,
They
in the
really
USA.
they really go out of their way as well to kind of like they really want you to understand how potentially deadly it is, right? Like they make a
Right,
big
right,
deal and they show the calloused
right.
knuckles and like you should have your hands
Hands
registered as a
registered,
weapon
yes.
and
Yes,
stuff like
I
that.
read my I reread my Hollywood Japan File article, and I described Joel Holt as looking like Humphrey Bogart crossed with Ed Sullivan.
Yeah,
And
actually right on the money.
yeah, he's like he has the voice, great voice.
Yes.
And you know, in fact, that voice would be probably highly valued today. But
Well, he
you know,
narrated, right? He narrated a bunch of sexploitation films, like
exploitation, the James Manfield. So that's what he basically did.
yeah,
He would have like, yeah, and
the Olga
then
films, like White Slaves of
yeah,
Chinatown, because I always enjoy
yeah,
the narration
Oh,
of them because they're really
yeah.
over the top. And
He
it,
liked
yeah,
interviewing hookers and nudists, and you know,
yeah.
yeah,
So
kind of like
do we know if he was at all um in Japan, like during the occupation or anything like that? Because he
no,
clearly can speak a bit of Japanese,
yeah,
right?
that
yeah,
surprised
Yeah.
me
yeah,
that it comes
yeah,
up in both films. I was
Yes.
surprised, and
yeah,
then
yeah, yeah.
particularly when
That was
there's an
surprising.
interview subject
Yeah,
who kind of says to him, "Look, you can speak Japanese," and then he goes to Japanese to
yeah,
say,
yeah,
I
you
was
know,
wondering if he was maybe stationed here as a young man,
yeah.
but he does have, it has to be said, he's got a very weird, sometimes his intonation is, and not to make fun of someone else's Japanese, it's just genuinely like peculiar. Like he there's a when he's on the phone, he says like rather than just say hi domo, he goes like hi domo. So
Oh
like he's
yeah,
got
I think
really
I think
weird
he just learned a
choices.
few lines. That's my guess, or maybe when he was filming. You know, back in the day, you could say like 5 sentences. Oh, this guy knows Japanese. You know, it's almost like he probably spoke the same amount of Japanese as Sean Connery in Rising Sun, and he was supposed to be.
Okota I'm very
Back then, like
okota.
5 sentences, like almost every movie, including you know, all you know, get the Japanese out of the way to you know, I was
Right.
born, you know,
Kate Capshaw in Black Rain is another good example.
right. All
But
of them.
but Joel Holt, I would Joel Holt seems kind of comfortable with like it
it
doesn't
does.
sound necessarily phonetically learned. Like
Right. Yeah, yeah.
I would put money, I would wager money that maybe as a young man he'd been stationed briefly
Yeah,
somewhere
that
in
could that
Japan,
be
I
the
think.
case, or he took a course at Berlitz, as many people in New York did at the theater at the
Mm.
time. But there was one thing I noticed. He kind of had a very dismissive attitude too.
This
Like
is true,
the
yeah.
scene in the microfilm shop, he's like, hi, so
Yeah.
and so, you know, just get on
Yakushiro,
with it,
he's like,
right?
yeah.
And I think his character was definitely based on Tokyo Joe with
Ah,
Humphrey Bogart. Definitely, because like Humphrey Bogart plays a guy, he grows up in Japan, but then he goes into the war and he has to fight the Japanese. So some of that was lifted almost word for
Interesting.
word.
interesting.
Um,
I've never
and
seen
I think
Tokyo
at
Joe,
the
so I
That's
didn't
yeah,
make
me
that
neither. That's one
connection.
of the very few Bogart films I haven't seen.
yeah. So
Yeah.
it's very and with both of these films, don't forget this is 1961. So the war is still fresh in many Americans' minds. It's like if you go back, let's say to the Iraqi war, that was like if it started in like 2003. Okay, that's the same amount of time, right? So
Yeah.
you know you don't think of that as ancient history. So it was very important to show I am not sympathetic to the Japanese. Like you know, now Japan's our ally, but at the same time, I'm not one of those like, you know, I lived in Japan as an American, damn it. And I had
Right.
friends. But when the time came, I killed them as, you know, with everyone else. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
same thing with Tokyo Joe. And that's earlier. Like, because even in this, like they questioned Humphrey Bogart, don't you have loyalties? No. When it came my time, I bashed him around like everyone else, you know. So
Right.
definitely he was doing Humphrey Bogart, Tokyo Joe in that.
Having said that,
So
though, I think for the time it's probably less of the Orientalist fantasy white savior narrative
Yeah,
than you might
yes.
expect. I was expecting
Yes.
it to be low, and in fact, for its time, it's kind of quite. I think the really sad thing is that nowadays they're still making films with that, like that fucking Jordan Catalano goes to Osaka one. What was it called? The Outsider, the one with
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
which was awful.
Oh, that was terrible. But the book that they bought the rights to what not Tokyo Vice,
Tokyo Underworld.
Tokyo Underworld. They
Yeah.
bought the rights to that, and that could have been a great book if they focused on
Yeah.
the guy with the mafia connections. That
Yeah.
would have been a fantastic book, but they just ruined it. It was no
It's
Tokyo Vice.
it's funny. I think about a decade ago or something. So that guy famously opened the first like spaghetti shop in Shibuya or whatever.
Right,
But then
yeah.
he did have a chain, and I remember it must have been like down in Fusa or somewhere like that. We were on our way to a job on a location bus, and I looked out the window, and there was a huge billboard for the local branch of like Zappetti's spaghetti, and it was still up, and it still had the picture of him, and I
Wow.
thought he was dead like 20 years ago or
Yeah.
something. But there is still a Zappetti spaghetti restaurant somewhere in Fusa.
That's where like Frank Sinatra, whenever they were in Tokyo, he was in Tokyo
Right.
with his entourage, got to stop by. Um,
I'm guessing there
but
was one down there because the Yokota Air Base is down there, so maybe some.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
yeah. But I think it is worth pointing out that Karate Hand Test, even though he is quite the irritable hothead, um, it's 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 not as offensive as you think a film from 1961 might be
No,
in that
no. And
regard.
also it's a nice documentary of the times, like a lot of scenes walking in the streets. So you get to see like the markets, you get to see Tokyo, how it looked in 1961, as opposed to like having some Hollywood set or making it look like Tea House of the August Moon. He actually showed uh audiences how the streets looked, and there's some scenes where he's like buying fruit from a fruit seller. I'm
Right.
sure that was just arranged
There's
on
a
the cuff.
really
Yeah,
nice score as well. I was surprised how good the score by Minoru Miki
yeah.
was.
The realm of the senses.
Right,
Yeah,
yeah, exactly. Like
yeah.
over a deck. But he's also the cinematography on this, surprisingly.
Oh, wow.
He pulled double duty.
And it's well filmed, actually. I mean,
Yeah.
it looks better than you kind of feel like maybe it should for the budget and for the quality, the intermittent quality of the acting, some of which is okay and some of which is
It would be
not
nice to see a
as okay.
remastered version for sure.
But it's good. Yeah, it's a good looking film.
Well, the film that you saw on YouTube is actually censored because in the scene in the nightclub with the dancer,
yeah,
she goes topless on the VHS I have, and then for
Okay.
YouTube, you see there's an edit, and I think they might have even inserted. It might not have even been her. They inserted it later, maybe, but that was definitely edited out.
Oh,
But
interesting. I wasn't aware of that. I guess
yeah,
that's
yeah, yeah.
probably for YouTube because that's
But
where we saw it. Yeah.
yeah, but I like the scenes in the police station where
Yeah.
he has to register his hands, and
yes.
then
That's a nice back and forth. For example, even though he's belligerent, that's a good
Yeah.
example. I think is the back and forth with him and the police captain or whatever. It's not. It's it's like they're both on a level playing field, right? They're
Yeah.
both kind of exchanging barbs. It's not like you said. It's not like I'm an American, goddamn it. It's not that kind of thing.
Right. It's like he had like a banter going. It's like, hey, I hear it's tough to make lieutenant.
Yeah,
But he
yeah,
said like,
yeah.
is it tough to learn karate or whatever it was? That's one of these the tropes in these like post-occupation films was that there was always had the American guy, but there was always like a drunken British or Australian character that was like for the comic relief and used for exposition and stuff. So if you watch like some of the first films made in Japan during the occupation, like Oriental Evil and Tokyo File 212. There's an actor, an Australian actor, Byron Michier, and he's also about 7 feet tall, just like the actor Frank Blaine in this film. And it was almost like this type of character, like the British or Australian, like he sometimes playing like a journalist, hanging out the Tokyo, the Foreign Correspondents Club, hard drinking, found in many movies at the time. So it's interesting, like they had this very, very tall, almost 7 foot tall actor. They
I
actually
think
brought
they're
him to
probably going
Japan.
for like Sydney Green Street.
That's what I
Right,
thought too.
exactly.
Very, if he's our kind of low rent Bogart, then this is our low
Yeah.
rent Sydney.
Well,
I
this
think.
guy though in particular, Frank Blaine, who I suspect probably isn't British because his accent's a bit too plummy and not very good.
Yes.
Yeah, I think, yeah.
But he reminded me more than anything else. He looks just like Vic Bruno, the guy who
Oh
is
yeah,
a Mad Hatter on the Batman TVs.
Batman. Yep.
Yeah.
He looked
I
a
think
lot
I
like
checked
him.
his other credits. Doesn't seem to have acted in much.
No.
But I wonder how he spent his time in Japan. That's the only thing that's always interesting. When you have these time capsules of the film, it would be so nice to have like the making or the
Yes.
behind the scenes, like what's
Yes.
going through their minds, or like, are they thinking, it's like Frank Blaine, he's like, wow, they flew me out to Tokyo, I hit the big time now, Hollywood. And then it's like he realizes, probably never in his last thoughts would be like, oh, 20 years later, it's going to come out on something weird.
Right.
But, probably it was very exciting, being in Tokyo and being in this production. But we kind of have to get to the elephant in the room about
Yes.
how this movie was made. So, long story short, this movie was funded by the CIA in order to spy on the Japanese Communist Party. It was a total front.
Ooh. Okay. So we are in Tokyo. This is very much Tokyo underworld.
Well,
territory, right?
Basically, what happens is that I'll read. So there's basically 3 reviews on IMDb.
Right.
And then you get to the last one, and it's called Argo and the Hands of Death. And basically, the son of the producer. So the producer was called Robert Sandstrom, and aka Richard Sloan. So this was an actual production company that the CIA used, apparently. They actually, they wanted it to look legit. So they went through him, and then it's documented in a book called These Fists Can Break Bricks by Grady Hendrix and Chris Poggiali. So I'm just going to read it. According to them, the film producer Robert Sandstrom, aka Richard Sloan, was a U.S.-American secret agent looking for communist agents in Japan. Previously, he had been involved in Operation Paperclip, and against this background, it's easy to understand why this movie uses a Nazi treasure as a MacGuffin. But I think what happened was this comment on IMDb is from 2013. This book came out after, so probably the author saw the comment and okay. And in the comment, he says, "Please, somebody investigate this while all the people are still living." So probably the people writing the book, they have to go with the first karate movie. Oh, wow, what a story. It fell into their lap. And they got like the full story, fortunately.
How much detail do they go into? Because I'm slightly
I didn't get the book. I just found this out like yesterday, but that's fascinating. But then it kind of makes sense. But this is what I found. So in Googling all the, so I like to Google the minor characters. Like you could find out a lot, right?
Right.
So there's an actor in this called Sho Onodera, and he has 3 credits. One was a small role in Taking of Pelham
Oh,
1, 2,
One, two,
3.
three. Yeah.
Right.
And
Oh, he's
so
probably one of the
Yeah,
group
the
that
Japanese
Walter Matt
yeah.
shows.
it,
That's a great scene. Yeah.
insults the
But
entire
when you
film.
look at his biography, Sho Onodera served our country bravely as a member of military intelligence. So you see,
Oh,
like this guy was playing an extra, but he was military intelligence.
Interesting.
And so after the war, so look, then he joined he spent part of his youth in Japan and was assigned to military intelligence service and brushed up on his Japanese at Camp Savage. His skills were so good that he was an instructor and he participated in the war crimes trials, I guess, as an interpreter. So you see, like soldier number 3 is really this like intelligence officer. So then it kind of starts to make sense.
Well, my take on it is that it's entirely plausible that that is true, but I
Yeah.
would like, because also, I mean, I know those guys who wrote that that the book on kung fu films as well. That, like I'm not saying that they're tread carefully here because they might actually see
Yeah.
this, but they write a lot about, like, they kind of jump around a little bit. They're dilettantes. They go
Yeah.
from one thing. They write a book about this, a book about that. I'm not sure how deeply they might have just read that IMDb comment
Well,
like we did and then just fleshed it out. But I'd like to see more evidence if before I
yeah.
totally swallow it. Let's put it that way.
Well, John Sandstrom, the alleged son of the producer, I did look him up, and you could tell he's half Japanese, and because the nurse, the nurse at the end of the film,
Yes.
that's
yeah.
his mother. So she was married to the producer, right? And that's why she got that role. But he is a doctor, and he works for like Asahi Medical Services. So you could contact him through LinkedIn. So yeah, that would be great as a follow-up
Yes, yeah,
to,
if you can,
because if he has like the archives and the papers,
that would be very
probably.
interesting.
It's
funny you mentioned the nurse as well. That was another nice surprise for me as well, because she works at St. Luke's International Hospital Clinic, which is where my mother-in-law worked.
Wow.
Actually, probably around this time.
Yeah.
But I don't think my mother-in-law is the nurse who they kind of lightly sexually harass. I don't think.
I was going to say though, Matt, when you brought up the elephant in the room, I didn't realize it was going to be this whole question of CIA espionage. I assumed that Joel Holt's karate is terrible.
Oh yeah.
And that placing like a whole section in the middle of the film, which is effectively a documentary, right?
Yeah.
Of people who actually know how to do karate, then it just makes his seem all the more haphazard and all over the place.
Yeah.
Hi, domo.
Yeah. But what's really funny is that how, in other comments and other articles, how many people say like compare it to like James Bond or even Austin Powers, because like the Blofeld character,
Yes.
and people say he looks like Dr. Evil, but that was kind of like that then you realize, oh, James, it came out like years before the first James Bond film. So like, maybe he read the novels and like took out that character, because that's definitely a James Bond type character. But yes, the fighting is pretty, like I said, Ed Sullivan, imagine like doing action. But I think as a B movie, that's what makes it great, because if they got someone like Chuck Norris with skills, then then it would have been taken seriously. We probably would have heard about it much sooner.
It's kind of a fun film. I have to say, there's something about it I quite like. Like, just the little trappings, like it that just they just have to allude to things like an old serial in a way, like the melting of the platinum in the acid, and just little bits and things like that make it kind of certainly not a boring watch at all. I was quite into it all the way through, I have to say.
And I quite like the use of the big lumps on his
Yeah,
hands
Yes,
metallic, yeah.
yes.
in terms of, because I thought he was the killer for like the first 3/4 of the film until
Yeah.
I realized, oh, hang on, his brother, his Japanese brother also has the same lumps on his fingers from the same smashing of tiles, right? So yeah, it was effective. It was an effective little kind of trick to play on the audience. I
Oh,
felt.
oh, that Japanese brother was the worst actor, even among
Yeah.
bad actors. He was just like reading his lines off the cue cards without
Yeah.
any punctuation. Um, but
It's
he,
funny.
for the role, he was good. He was good for that role because, I guess. Um,
It's
but
worth
it did
men-
have some. I did take some notes. One line I really liked was like, I guess, take off your shoes, and like Maber's like, no, it's like, would you wear your hat to dinner? That's how they feel about shoes. So there was an attempt to
Mhm.
explain the culture. Um, but like I said, they made him a little, for someone who grew up in Japan, they just made Matt Carver a little bit too rude and dismissive, and like,
He's quite
we're,
brisk with everyone, isn't he? Yeah, he's
yeah,
always in a hurry.
yeah,
It's worth mentioning as well. The whole karate thing as well. I think it took until maybe the 70s and people like Sonny Chiba and Japan Action and Club to actually make um karate cinematic, because the thing they mention because it stops dead for a while to do like this karate demonstration thing.
yeah,
And the thing they do point out is, well, it only lasts a few seconds or something like that. And that is the thing. It is difficult to make karate look cinematic, right?
right, yeah,
Eventually they figured out in the 70s how to, in the same way as they made kung fu, um, you know, actual kung fu fights don't have people, flying through the air and doing flips and stuff. They're a lot more close contact and quick and done, right? Um,
right.
so so that's kind of fascinating in its own way that they almost they haven't tried to give it a flourish or anything. Like everything's done quite quickly.
Mm.
1, 2 punch done.
Yeah. Yeah. Another that is a good point. Another, when you start to watch a lot of these movies, the Japanese woman, the whole Madame Butterfly
Mhm.
Right.
trope, the woman left behind, and she was pregnant. That's so many movies like that. But like in Tokyo Joe, it was too early. So I think they had to make his wife like Russian or like White Russian or someone like that left behind. It was
Right.
only, I think like Sayonara with uh Marlon Brando and things like that. But there was this whole I think a book came out how like a lot of these movies, because the US government wanted to like feminize the image of Japan, as like, because you had all these propaganda movies, and then you had to sell Japan back to the American public as an ally. So
Mm.
when they started using like the beautiful scenes of Mount Fuji and cherry blossoms, and then a beautiful woman as the love interest, and then always, a lot of times the men were like comic relief, like they were
Right.
bumbling, and that became a trope. Whereas, like, so the type of
Slightly
the love
emasculated
interest, yeah,
figures.
yeah, emasculated, Mickey Rooney, or like everybody, even then Marlon Brando in Tea House of the August Moon, where he's in total yellow face and just obsequious, and like it's always the
Right.
GI and all the, and you could see even in this movie, like the sister, she's like in love with him
Yeah.
from the minute he steps through the door. Um, that was kind of like tacked on. What was that all about? Yeah,
Mm.
the sister looks
But
like,
still another trope that lives to
yeah,
this day,
don't
actually.
go.
Some kind of Netflix movie where, yeah, someone goes to Tokyo and, yeah, immediately the the hot young actress is going to fall for the pale face, right, and ignore all the guys around her. And so unfortunately it's one, I think it's forgivable in 61. It's a lot less forgivable in 2025, right?
Right. And you know what I always like? I saw a documentary on biracial Japanese and American kids whose fathers were GIs, right? And they have no qualms about how their parents met, and they could laugh about it today. It's like there was no big love story. It's like my mother wanted to shop at the PX. My father bought her a pair of pantyhose. That was it. You know, it was something like that, and they can like laugh about it today. But you know, it wasn't like this big Madame Butterfly love story. It was like people meeting at, you know, bars, you know, where the GIs went, or they were like working in these type of clubs, and that's how a lot of these you know, stories came about. But you know, of course, with Hollywood, you have to make it everything into like Madame Butterfly, I guess.
Yeah. For more, please follow the links below and read more of Matt's writing over at the website, because it's all still up, right? And maybe start with the Midnight Eye, because that's a good primer. I think there's some good stuff in there.
Did you notice that for example, new Tokyo Beer Hall restaurants, you know, they showed like some of these restaurants. I wonder like how many of these places are like still around in Tokyo.
Yeah.
Because isn't the Imperial Hotel, wasn't that like the Frank Lloyd Wright design?
That's right. Yeah, that's still there. Yeah. I've been in there once, but you need like you actually have to, someone with an American passport actually has to go with you so you can get in.
Really?
I think that's the one I'm thinking of. Yeah.
That's interesting. I'm trying to think. Oh, the funny part in the movie that he chops the water jug and puts a big dent in it, and like that's like the extent of like the karate violence.
Well, I think it's a shame that we weren't treated to a Joel Holt versus William Shatner karate film. I think
that would have been
that would be a cult movie to this day, I think, if that had happened.
But if you look at the career of, you know, Joel Holt, it's almost like the span like the Beatles. It's like 1961 and like 67, that's it. So I always find it fascinating how like certain filmmakers, they had their run,
right,
and then it just ends. Like it ends like 7 years later. No one's either they, you know, they got tired of doing it, or I guess they ran out of financing. But you know, unfortunately, there's you know, with someone like Joel Holt, there's not a lot of documentation. Probably very few people probably did interviews. So it's something that I'm sure like one of his descendants, or I mean, we can't even say if he's still with us or not. It was
I don't know.
Was it in the IBM? That would be funny if he's on like Facebook, like, you see this guy, you should have contacted me.
He must be 100 now if he's around, I would
yeah, that's true.
Yeah, this is good value, this pod. Where else? I don't think there's anywhere else you will find Joel Holt compared to the Beatles. I think that's
I don't think so.
That's value for money. So, but so let's talk. Go on.
Sorry, did you ever do a good book about Nick Adams and his kind of, you know, his life and his, because I mean, obviously a big chunk of it was spent in Japan doing the kind of the Toho stuff.
Chasing Kumi Mizuno around.
And
you can't blame him. I mean,
yes, and getting in big fights with her. Apparently, there was a very explosive relationship. Apparently, but I'm wondering if there's, because he's one of those people, you know, one of those Americans who kind of goes to Japan and kind of makes a niche for himself there in film. I'm just wondering if there's a
whole bunch of people you come across as well. We were talking before, Chico Laurent, and
yes,
there's a guy called Enver Altenby. I think he's Turkish, and he's in a load of old monster movies. He turns up in episodes of Kamen Rider and stuff. There's a lot of these expat figures. We had one on the show, a guy called Dennis Fault, who was in Godzilla 1984, and we talked about the Drifting Classroom film, which is a weird one.
Oh yes.
He's in that as a teacher, and he lives in Koenji, I think. He's still knocking around. I bumped into him at an audition or two. So I'm fascinated by these.
And then we haven't talked about Manster, but as soon as I started watching Karate Hands death, there was an element that just took me back to Manster as well. Something about that
Oh,
quite
yes.
slightly seedy. And again, although in that case, I think that film is even more progressive in a weird way, in that like its main character is a complete piece of shit, basically, who goes way off the rails when he goes to Japan and decides that he wants to
I
have.
resemble that remark.
I haven't, boy, I haven't seen that film or even thought about that Manster in a long time.
It's
That's a
well
That
worth
was,
coming back to, I think.
yeah, wow.
Oh, another one,
Yeah,
because the guy, some of the people involved in that also made that weird Revenge of Dr. X film that X
yes,
Michael
yes,
wrote and stuff like that. So yeah,
yes,
there's a book in there somewhere. I think
yeah.
many of these people are still around.
That's right. Tetsu Nakamura. He was the the English speaking, when they needed an English speaking Japanese actor in all these early films, he was always the go-to guy. But in this film, they didn't go to him. They got the actor who played the father in this one, the English speaking father. He was actually in, dozens of actually, Japanese productions.
I think this is Hiroshi Hayashi, right? That's the only name
Yeah,
I
yeah,
recommended. He's sorry, recognized. He's in a lot of
yeah,
he's in
yeah.
like 100+ films or something.
Yeah, so maybe he was like, for the budget, okay, we need one real actor, so let's get
Yeah, he's
him.
perfectly fine. He like comes across, and his English
Yeah.
is pretty good as well.
Mhm.
Yeah, but you always have to wonder, like with these Japanese actors or actors, when they're in these type of productions, like what's going through their head. Like, obviously it's a portrayal of their country, not entirely accurate, and that's being kind. So, like, do they just like do the movie and like forget about it? And because like some of the times when I used to write the column, I would have like, and then I would get comments. My mother was in that film, or my grandmother was in that film, or even like I was in that film, but I never saw it.
Wow.
Uh, so that's always interesting. Like for some, it was just probably like a job, and they probably never thought about it, or they probably, thought like maybe they were in a documentary, like in this film, The Fruit Seller. Did they tell him, hey, you're in a movie, we're buying some fruit off you, and it's going to be on the big screen? They're probably like, okay, can we just take some, I'm sure in the case of like with all the extras, they had no idea. And to this day, it could be like the only surviving footage of their great grandparents,
Mm.
and they have no idea that it's out there.
That they were at a nudist camp in 1960s.
Yes.
So
But
that,
it's
yeah.
funny. I always think about Karate Kid 2 because I can remember hearing from some of the Japanese actors involved. Because initially the plan was to shoot it in Okinawa, and then when the production team was scouting locations, they were like, "This doesn't look at all like what we imagined Okinawa should look like." So they instead built an Okinawan village in Hawaii,
Yeah, yeah,
filmed there, and like all these scenes of people like wheeling TVs around in wheelbarrows, and it just
yeah.
there's no resemblance. As being a big fan of, it's one of my favorite places in the world is Okinawa. I've been there multiple times, and yeah, it looks nothing like the Okinawa in Karate Kid 2, which was my first image as a child of Okinawa.
Yeah.
Was in Ireland watching this and be like, this place seems very exotic and old fashioned, and it's not Okinawa at all.
Well, that was a kind of inside joke in Cobra Kai, because then they actually went to film in Okinawa,
Oh,
and it was like wink, wink. Okay, now we're showing you how it really
what it
looks.
really looks like, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's always funny when they feel like, oh, it doesn't look like our image of Japan, and a lot of the tropes is the yakuza with the old cars. But it's like during the bubble, they're not going to be driving those old big American cars. Why would they want those gas guzzlers when they could buy a Mercedes?
Mhm.
That's how we saw them. The movies we grew up with. So even for a long time, you watch like all of those movies, and Japan didn't end up looking like Japan for a while. I guess the major one was Black Rain, which was filmed in Osaka and down alleys and whatnot. But then they ran out of money, so they had to film in Los Angeles and recreate Japan as well. So
recently,
yeah,
our mutual friend Johannes Shona as well is writing a column for Osaka.com, right, about
yeah,
films shot in Osaka,
right,
including
yeah, yes,
Black Rain. That's
right.
also worth a read. I might put the link up to his
You
stuff.
know, yeah, you know what is very interesting? That article has a lot of hits because there's a whole generation of people who are interested in Osaka, never saw that film, never even heard of that film.
Right.
And in rediscovering it, you know, they're like, wow, this was ahead of its time. Because, like, you know, of course, people always describe now when they come to Japan, oh, it's like Blade Runner. But the guy who actually directed Blade Runner said, okay, here's where I got my inspiration. So, yeah, that's great.
Before we move on to our next film, we should ask Matt as well that what's in your because you're a bit of a Karate Hand of Death memorabilia collector.
You know, I thought I had the memorabilia. I looked, and maybe I have the press book buried, but what I love probably the most about this film is the poster. I think it's one of the greatest posters. The colors, it has those like very bright colors, but now it's vintage, and just like the layout. And I think for a lot of, I looked at Joel Holt's the posters. He was very good at designing those posters. So for a while, I had it on a T-shirt because it had such an impact. And then after years, it got, you know, it came up. But I realized, like, after watching it again, I'm gonna make another T-shirt. Yeah, from that.
Poster. It looks like a horror movie, like a new
dimension,
a new powerful dimension in terror. And then there's Bikini Girl there.
It's also one of those annoying bits of advertising, though, in terms of pernickety film reviewers like myself, because it's Karate the Hand of Death, but on the print, there's no definitive article. And I always tend to go with what's on the print, but I've noticed everywhere that it's written about, it's Karate the Hand of Death. But at least in my book, it'll be Karate Hand of Death.
And it was a Joseph Brenner like release.
Yes, yeah. They put it out. Yeah, so that gets into the whole sexploitation of the thing as well. And like we said, Joel Holt as well was at some point was obviously part of the larger Jane Mansfield orbit. Producer on Primitive Love, co-directed The Wild Wild World of Jane Mansfield, which is a really interesting film.
I
quite
saw
bad
that
taste as well.
Yes, incredibly poor taste.
So he did that, and he obviously had a great voice, so he narrated the Olga films and some of the bits and pieces. Mondo Shenita. He does It's a Sick, Sick, Sick World as well, which is another bit of narration. And
you could tell with like a little more ambition. He kind of had the same viewpoint as Hugh Hefner, you know, because when you think about it, it was like an impressive time before the 60s, and he was doing kind of very risque things and interviews, and probably, if you looked, they're probably cut from the same cloth, you know, straight-laced guys, but, you know, with erotic tastes, you know, and, you know, trying to push the boundaries. But I don't know if he had the same audience. But
trying to put on film the same kind of stuff that was in men's adventure magazines, right? Like Men magazine and stuff like that. And
but in a way, also like justifying it, like, you know, I'm not interested in the nudity. I got to document the scene.
Yes, there's great articles.
I'm a journalist.
Yeah,
I'm a serious journalist.
Yeah, like, I think there's even a scene where one of the guys who's interviewed, one of the males at the nude camp are fantastic. All of them.
They're genuine. They're genuine.
Oh, absolutely.
All the women are glamour models who've been kind of just sent in to replace.
Yeah,
the
one of the
real-
guys, he was like George Costanza. In fact,
Yes.
if I edit that guy out and make it a reel, it's gonna go viral. I have no doubt. Like
I agree.
putting that on, like people seeing that on their feed, this guy talking, and like it was hilarious.
So this is all
by
of
Daniel Klaus as well, which
Yeah. Okay, well, I guess we should set up the thing for all of
this
me.
is all of me.
We
1963.
naturally.
Again, directed, produced by Jared Holt. Script by William L. Rose, who actually is kind of interesting. He made a kind of string of exploitation films starting the same year as this. He made 50,000 Years BC Before Clothing, which is another nudist camp
nice
film.
title.
And then all the way to, you're probably familiar with, Nick, The Girl in Room 2A, the 70s Giallo film. That I think that's the last one he directed. But he's most notorious for having directed a film which apparently does exist, and you can see it, but it's very difficult to see. But the trailer is notorious. The Smut Peddler from 19.
Oh, I've heard of this film. Yes.
Great trailer, and apparently it exists. Someone found it somewhere in like Scandinavia or something, but no one's put it out properly yet. But I'm very much looking forward to The Smut Peddler. Yeah, and so Jared Holt is also in the film as Bill, and he rescues a young woman who's kind of collapsed in the street of. It's supposed to be New York City, but apparently it was shot in Pennsylvania somewhere, right?
Okay.
And yeah, and this turns out to be Brenda Denau, I think you pronounce it. An incredibly attractive woman, I have to say.
Yes.
Very cute and very well endowed.
So, and
also,
so I remember going to see Lost Highway in the cinema whenever it came out in the early 90s, and being a young man, an impressionable young man, and I've never been so physically uncomfortable in a cinema because I was rock hard anytime Patricia Arquette strips down in that film. It was one of those come to Jesus or whoever moments in your life. And so yeah, when Clive sent me the link, it said, "Oh, can you grab this from the place where I grab these films from?" I then did the minimal amount of research and was stunned to discover who our lead actor, right, mother of Patricia and Rosanna and David and all the other Arquettes.
Same reaction. In
and
fact,
she's stunning. I mean, immediately my mind went places it shouldn't, like to kind of those brothers, kind of like mother daughter, someone's head trapped in a washing machine kind of. I was like, no, pull back, Nick, don't go there.
It's funny because like I was deciding, should I watch this? There's a new episode of Severance. Okay, I'll watch this first, but not realizing there's connection between both. Who would ever think until I looked like who is this actress? And what? Married to Louis Arquette. Okay, and then
she's also in Olga's House of Shame as well. If you have had enough of
top of my list to get to next.
Well,
all the Olga films are good. Anyway, I love the Olga films.
It did remind me of, like Thora Birch? Both of her parents were golden era hardcore.
That's right.
Filmmakers, which was I remember being surprised by when Ghost World came out or whatever. But anyway, yes.
So yes, it turns out to be, and then she has this. So she narrates this kind of tale of woe, very familiar from these films, of how she was tricked into modeling for dirty. All of this.
Yeah. Joel is very, so he's just rescued her after she's been assaulted, like sexually on the street, and takes her back to his place and says, calm down, tell me your problems. But while you're telling them to me, I'm going to browbeat you into coming to a nudist camp with me. It's a very strange thing to do in the situation.
She is understandably suspicious. Especially when he starts showing, let me show you a film.
These films. That projector,
like he has like the nice guy syndrome, like rescued her from the streets, and but to be honest, some of that dialogue is pretty snappy. When what is it? the dialogue is pretty, you know, back and forth. Yeah, a lot of cliches, but at least, you know, in between the cliches, there's some great lines. Uh, and that cheesy producer, did you say that? You know, sit down and relax. It won't hurt you. You know, go out and see a show. It'd be good for you. All those things, like, you know, but I loved also the interviews with, you know, in the nudist camp.
So
that's hilarious. How did you get into this? They're all in denial.
He fails to convince her to go to the nudist camp, unsurprisingly. So he's a documentary filmmaker. It's one of his assignments. So off he goes, and suddenly the film bursts into color as well, right? And he's at a nudist camp, which is I think is the same nudist camp from.
She has gone with him, Clive. She has gone with him, but she's just sitting in the car outside the camp.
Okay.
He goes for the drive, and then he goes in. We're to assume that Joel is nude. I
suppose you don't see him on screen.
I think we're supposed to assume that he's nude while carrying on the interviews.
This is the same nudist camp from Doris Wishman's Diary of a Nudist as well.
Okay.
So it would have been the second time in a few years where a film crew turned up and said, okay, all you ugly real nudists, fuck off. We're going to bring in the glamour models. Apart from the dudes, you can stay.
You guys can stay. No, but I did want to jump back though for a second, because in the middle of the film, there's an astonishing scene where she's narrating her experiences of being exploited and kind of put upon and stuff. And then it cuts to the series of other interviews that are obviously scripted, right, with the other girls who work for the modeling agency.
Oh, yes.
Who and that scene is astonishing because the first woman just comes out and just unloads that was in the face of every one of the filthy men who buys my photograph.
Oh yeah, I wrote that.
Scumbags. It's so good. You know, that's where one piece of the audience would be squirming in masochistic pleasure as she just.
I want to clip that. It's like, I'm from the Detroit gin mills, you know, and she's talking about the life she could have had. Yeah, I could have stayed and worked at gone to the Detroit gin mills in this crummy town and pumped out a couple of kids and had a shitty life. And it's like, man, that should be sampled for some kind, just sample that dialogue and loop it. Oh man, and then it's
like say the other ones. About you as well, Nick. I just have this image of you visiting a dominatrix and you telling her about your lost highway experience while she rides the eel into your groin and tells you you're a very naughty boy.
And then there was another one. It's like, I was the queen of the springtime plantation ball. You know, won the beauty contest and ended up on this year. But there was one who kind of looked like Tracy Lords. So she was like a dead finger for Tracy Lords, right?
Like that too. I was like, whoa, shit.
I don't know what you're both talking about.
But I still can't go over that guy with the glasses at the nudist camp. The way he was trying to justify, very defensive. I got out of the army, and then I bought a magazine. The first magazine I bought happened to be a nudist magazine, and the sun. It's great for your body. That's why I'm into it. Oogle the girls. No, the sun. You see, if you go out and get the sun on you, then in the winter your body it's like it's like
that bit is gold because
that's genius.
Man,
he's explaining. He's saying yes, you can condition your body if you go out in the winter. and the narrator's like, so you're saying you can condition your body? Yes, absolutely. And then he goes, so do you practice nudity in the winter? No.
No.
It's almost the Spinal Tap of nudist camp.
Oh yeah, it's so good. I'm telling you, if we have to clip that and put it on YouTube or something, because that will go viral, because that is so hilarious. And the fact that he's very defensive. Hey, do you talk to, Joel Holt's trying to get hey, do you meet any girls here? It's like, oh no, yeah, well, after a while, you don't even look at the bodies. You know, we might get to talking if we have the same interests. What was he into? If I'm into stamp collecting and she's into, what was it?
Coin collecting.
It was some kind of
coin collecting
hobby. What was it?
It was coin collecting. I remember he was like,
coin collecting. Yeah,
it might be. For instance, she might be
I might sit down and we get to talking, and if I find out we have similar interests, such as coin collecting, then we might establish a relationship. That's
mentions it twice, so he loves.
That's a lot of words to say, I'm not going to stare at her chest.
Right.
And they're a little bit too defensive of like, oh, the nudity? No, after all, you don't even notice.
Well, to be fair, maybe Brenda Denau is just off screen. So, yes, because of course, in the way of these nudist camp films, always, it's amazing how many of these nudist camp films have that same plot of trying to convince someone to join, and then the happy. And of course, she does turn up topless, and everyone's happy. I think this is so. I'm a huge fan of the nudist camp film. My favorite is, of course, Nude on the Moon. Nude on the Moon is the pinnacle of it's like the most relaxing film ever made. It's an absolute masterpiece, and it's the one nudist camp film that has a slightly different take on it, right? That it's this kind of science fiction kind of. But after Nude on the Moon, I'd say this ranks. If you're a connoisseur of the nudist camp film, you should definitely watch this one, I think, because it is pretty.
Well, it's an odd duck
charming.
because it is on the but it's also got this weird kind of like it wants to have its cake and eat it too, because it like the first big chunk of the film is kind of a diatribe seemingly against nude photography and the exploitation of young women. And then we get to but then there's this healthier version which you could access if you were to go.
Cake and Eat It too is the nudist camp genre all over, right? I mean,
right.
And it's amazing how many. I can't think of one actually, apart from Nude on the Moon, which is one of the reasons it's a classic. That doesn't have the people having to justify the lifestyle. It's amazing people just can't get their head. Oh, and they always do. Oh, it's great for, like you said, it's good for your body and and shit like that.
It's like the pot smokers before it came legal. Oh, the hemp. I'm all about the rope and the hemp and the clothing making. Yes. Oh yeah. Smoke it, sure. Yeah, I toke it once in a while, but that's not why I want to legalize it, because of the clothing and the rope and the the environment. And then once that got legal, hey, what about the what about the environment? Oh, I don't care about that. I just
But to be fair though, I actually believe them, because I'm of the thing with the nudist camp. So I'm a bit of a semi-nudist myself, in so much as at home I very rarely wear.
Thanks, Clive. I'm just picturing you just wear a t-shirt.
Okay.
I don't
French, very continental.
I'm very happy like walking around naked. And pause me if this gets too exciting for anyone.
Okay.
But the thing is, I kind of the only thing that about nudist camp films is I really love the idea. I like the idea of all these smiling people just like just enjoying being naked and being. The only thing is they don't seem to fucking do anything. So it's like you're bored after 5 minutes. Like if you've had your fill of volleyball, like they don't do anything. They just wander about and you're thinking, okay, this is nice, but I'd like to do something other than just lounge around.
I always wondered, is like the nudist camp a gateway into the swingers lifestyle? Is that what? Because you always, possibly like, does it just like, you have a side uninhibited people, and obviously some of them are probably are thinking these things. So I always wondered, is it as wholesome as it is it portrayed, or is it like after hours, like, okay,
right,
this is what we show the world, but we're having key parties and all this stuff, and once the sun goes down and you can't sunbathe.
I wonder.
Probably, I expect a bit of truth to that, I would think.
Yeah,
because you don't hear much of the nudist. I mean, I'm sure they're still around, right?
There's new beaches. There's new beaches here in Canada for sure. It's interesting. They're predominantly, kind of. My sisters have occasionally availed themselves of them, and they've said mostly when they go, it tends to be gay men who are using them as a kind of a place to hang out and chill and whatever. So, I think, yeah, at least in this part of Canada, it seems that it's kind of like
I think, maybe they've been rebranded. Like even the word nudist is probably like naturist or something like that, and it's more
clothing
like,
optional, I think is what they're called.
Yeah, clothing. Now. Yeah, they just
clothing optional.
But I think it's more what Clive's saying now. It's like themes and nudity, like camping, or like mountain climbing. So it's not like maybe that was their grandparents' version, but like, no, we got to be more active. Well, there's those shows, Naked and Afraid, that
Right.
probably fit the concept. Okay. Yeah, like some producers, what are these nudist camp people doing? We got to get them, in a survival mode.
There's that there's like a British nudist short from the 60s, Eves on Skis, where it's naked women skiing.
Sounds good.
I mean, the endless they should bring back the nudist camp film. I don't know when they made the last one, but I think there's still a lot of joy to be had in the genre, and just mix it up, like, because a few, like, Doris Wishman tried, like, for instance, there's that one, Hideout in the Sun, which starts off as a bank heist film and then turns into a nudist film, and then of course there's nudist. I mean, she's the pioneer of trying new things with the nudist camp genre, but yeah, you could do a lot more. Forget about don't have people just talking about how wonderful it is, the lifestyle. We've done that.
Yeah.
So now,
a slasher film in a new.
They need to. No, you're right. They need to remake this. Yeah, the heist one, and have Jason Statham.
Yeah. He would be perfect, because you wouldn't even have to do the full nudity. You could tease it. Here's one for you: Die Hard in a nudist colony.
Yeah. Instead of being barefoot, he's running around nude, and there's glass.
Yep. There's just lots of rose bushes, and you risk a severe injury.
Yeah, Statham's in danger of danger, and scarring his schlong while taking down the terrorists.
But judging from those interviews, from let's say if someone were to go there as a voyeur, what's in it for the women? Because it's like the quality of the nudist women, as opposed to, like, there's one guy there who was like, he must have been 80 years old, and at one point, what I always wondered, are they comfortable in their own skin? But I guess you have to be comfortable in looking at a wide variety of, it's not like you're going there and it's like, okay, model quality, this nude colony. It's like there's a screening thing. It's like, you didn't make the cut.
Yeah. There's no velvet rope.
We want this, there's an audition process. We want, like, men and women to have,
because if you look at this film and other this comes, it's suspiciously a lot of actresses turn up in a lot. These are not nudists for them. They were in some Barry Mahone film or Russ Meyer movie the week before, and now they're in
right.
This.
Funny though, but coming back to actually Karate Hand of Death, is the fact that, like, we have interviews with I'm guessing 2 German, because I think the old guy is German as well, but definitely
there's 2 German women, I think. One,
and definitely the one of the kind of redheaded woman with the incredible eyebrows. She's German, right?
Right.
And then you've got a Japanese lady, which is, to me, the most surprising thing is actually the Japanese lady there who's, like, actually Japanese, and she's there photographing
and Joel Holt gets to impress her with his Japanese that he learned from karate.
I'm sure that he brought it. My guess would be, like, he knew her, or, like, I don't think it was a coincidence. Like,
I was wondering
she
that.
seemed to know him.
Yeah. But although then again, the only thing I would say about that, though, is she's a very good actress in that case, because she genuinely does seem like someone who was just approached and she was a journalist.
Yeah. And it's funny, like, he couldn't communicate. But she seemed to be like, you kind of wonder, like, does she realize she's going to be in a movie?
I wondered that too.
Like, she and like, she just standing there, like, okay, I got to take off my clothes to photograph. Obviously, you have to take off your clothes. But did she realize, okay, you're going to be on, like, the big screen, you're going to be on DVDs, like, years later, you're going to be on YouTube, of course, not at the time, but she didn't seem like like everyone else, all the other women, they were very playing towards the camera, where she was kind of, like, slumped and, like, just answering questions, like, if, as if it was like an, Eikaiwa type class, and
yes.
Do you realize you're nude and you're on camera, and you're not from this world, but probably thinking like, who in Japan's ever going to see this? Who in Japan is ever going to be talking about this?
Maybe he had
time I went to a nudist camp.
Maybe
back
he had
in the
a
60s.
hidden camera. Maybe next to him is Chesty Morgan from Deadly Weapons, and she lifts up one of her breasts and it turns the camera on.
But I was just going to say, it's funny because what you have are again, like just 20 years after the war, you have Germans and Japanese. It's completely, it's not commented on in any way, shape, or form. Like, it is amazing to me the speed with which
Nick,
the world
are you trying to say this was
on.
a nudist camp for Axis villains?
That's what I'm wondering. No, I'm just saying it's always fascinating to me the speed with which we can pivot and be like, okay, these people who were our enemies, 2 years ago or a year ago, well, that piece of history is done, and we have.
That's
true.
Then it pivots.
The Great War against the nudists of 1945.
That's what's interesting. Is like it pivots back during the trade war.
Yes.
So when if you look at all those movies, Gung Ho,
Rising Sun,
Collision Course, Jay Leno and Pat Morita, they just took the old propaganda films, those stereotypes, like they made some progress, and then it's like, okay, now we're having a trade war, and they just suddenly, you have everyone's talking about like kamikazes, and even in like the Bad News Bears go to Japan,
right?
They had to mention like, the kids even, they're watching like some war movies, so they had to show like, okay, they're going to Japan, but we are well aware that Japan was not. So that's pretty much only happening now with like the prestige TV Shogun and Tokyo Vice and Pachinko, where it's like, okay, we don't have to look back, we don't have to, but probably like even like a movie, as you mentioned, like The Outsider, like there's probably some producer, wait, we can't film this unless we mention all these things.
That stuff drives me up the wall, man. It's especially when especially exploitation films are the worst, actually, in a way, because it's like you come to Japan, you feel, oh, for fuck's sake, you have to have a ninja, and you have to have someone brandishing a katana, and you just, for fuck's sake, when you're going to tire of these things? Like, there's plenty of other stuff. Yes. You don't have to do all that crap, right?
Yeah. Well, what I did was when I was getting doing the column, I was getting a lot of submissions from student films or independent films. And for a while, everyone was doing something on the Enjo Kosai. And from a serious, look at these poor women. But, they have to have a scene, panties in the vending machine. You're not in the vending machine, but they go down into Kabukicho and get like this, everyone. But then you realize it's like, it wasn't even such a big, the media like blew it out of proportion, and basically it reached, I have to do a student film. What's a good topic? Oh, these, high school girls in Japan selling themselves, panties in the, and then it's like, you could tell like, so that was like another way of just taking like these stereotypes and putting it on film, but they thought like, I'm doing a service, but
right.
You just, this is something you heard,
and there's a lot of alarmist stuff as well, isn't it? Like you said, it's in that expose kind of vein.
Like even the hikikomori. Okay, are you really interested in this guy locked in his room? Are you going to bring him food, or is it like the show Hoarders? You're watching it as entertainment. Because it's a difference. Like this guy's in his room and you're watching it, and then everyone's and then at a cocktail party, you're going to bring that up when someone mentions Japan. Right. That, and then it's like, what's the point of bringing that up? It was some trivia you found out, but it's not like you're going to take a vested interest in like some guy.
Exactly. Oh, it's just a stick to bash. So it's like. No, and someone in modern Japan, the birth rate is declining, and
all that stuff.
Like,
this
like,
again. it's almost like someone says like they come back from Japan and they have all these like they can't even process it. They're trying to explain the experience. And then some guy know-it-all goes, you know, the birth rate's falling, and I heard that blah blah blah, you know, and it's just like stuff that people repeat over and over.
What's annoying is sometimes sort of slight going off the topic here, but it's not so much that what they're saying is not true. It's just that it's out of proportion. And the worst one is when you bump into people who are like here on holiday or something, and they've been here like a couple of weeks, and you're trying to kind of explain something like within the wider context, and they're not having it. They're like, they're like, they start like having a go at you or something. And you're like, what the back off? What the fuck? Why?
I came here to confirm my stereotype,
just take it
and you're not helping.
Yeah, exactly. Plus, as well, the other thing that annoys me is especially that again, that white savior complex is whatever, they'll choose like a topic, and you're thinking, do you not think that there's people who live here, like Japanese people, who are aware of the problems of their own country more than you? They don't need you to come and point it out to them. You know, it's a very colonial mindset, but wrapped up in this kind of political correctness. It's kind of quite disgusting sometimes, I have to say.
You know, the funny thing is just we'll get back to the topic, but they lose interest in it. Like I was looking, you know, for like 5 years, that stuff, Taiji, the whales, the dolphins, my feed was full of that. And then I looked recently, the last post was like 6 years ago. So from when it went out of fashion until now, no one ever wondered. I wonder, it's like it was like, now it's, you know, out of sight, out of mind. But when everyone was like talking about it, everyone had an opinion. And now nobody has an opinion. So, you know, to a lot of people, this was a very important topic to you for like 2 years. You saw a documentary. Understandably, you have these feelings. And you wrote a whole bunch of stuff. When anyone mentioned Japan, you had to bring this up every time. And now, you know, you've moved on to something else.
Yeah. I feel in general nowadays, there's too much, people feel the need to have opinions. Like, you don't have to. It's fine. Don't worry about it. Like, you don't have to have an opinion on everything. Like, someone else will fight that fight, or someone else. It'll, you know, you don't have to.
So going back to the film, at least someone like Joel Holt is asking questions. You know, did he capture it? Did he not capture it? He captured, you know, even in the footage he took, he captured at a time when few people filmed in Tokyo in the early 60s, he captured people walking in the street. So as a time capsule, you know, it's more important someone's opinion, writing a thesis, you know, from 1961, because you're going to be reading that and like, but at least whether the film succeeds or not, at least you see, you know, Tokyo 1961, and, you know, how much footage from, you know, is there really from, you know, a Western perspective. So that's what
and a big domo arigato.
But it's just so fascinating, because when I watch the film, like All of Me, it takes me back to the time when people were trading tapes, and like you had no idea what to expect. Like you're reading it in a fanzine, you're reading it in the psychotronic thing, and it's a image in your mind, and then finally you get to see it, and you sit down and you watch it. Whereas most of this stuff can be downloaded now or on YouTube. So now, you know, it's not the same feeling as of like discovery as when the package comes and you're opening it up. And
although dealing with Canadian customs was fascinating, because I would be getting stuff from Video Search of Miami, stuff from
Video Search of Miami.
They're grayed out, awful soupy prints with like the and or, you know, European trash cinema, Craig Ledbetter. There was all these people who were in the gray market, you know, sellers, right? And so but like, these packages would come, and then customs would have like slashed them open, or, you know, you could get you could get in trouble for certain things that you would order that were maybe, yeah. But I remember at one point I got a package that clearly they had taken outside and run a car over. There was tire treads across, and all the VHS tapes inside were just cracked open, and the spools were out. It was like, oh, thanks, Canadian Customs.
Was it thematic? Had you ordered a bunch of Burt Reynolds car racing?
Now that you say that, yeah, they were all Hal Needham films, and they decided to burn. No, I don't know why I would need to gray market Hal Needham films.
No, the European cuts,
spaghetti westerns. They were probably just like, yeah, who knows why they.
But it's worth saying that particularly in regards to All of Me, and I'm not sure if it was something weird with Joe put All of Me. I suspect it probably was.
Something weird is, their print is, their little watermark is all over.
When that stuff started coming out, that was really a revelation, because of course people were putting out other films that were kind of obscure, you hadn't seen for years or whatever, but the thing with a lot of those exploitation films from the 60s is they weren't released on video.
No.
And they never played on television.
No.
And they only played in some theaters. So those things were, unless you were old enough to remember reading some of the magazines that covered them, like Adam Film World or something like that, like those things were genuinely out of the blue, like these true, and they don't have the utility of hardcore, right? So it was like, whoa, what the fuck are all these weird nudie films? Like they were a real revelation, and there's so many of them. It's unbelievable.
In a similar vein, the Japanese VHS collectors, the subgenres that they collected. When I was selling tapes on eBay, there was like, I think I probably mentioned this before, a whole, maybe like 10 people in the entire world, 20 people, they liked Vietnam War films shot in the Philippines with like these actors, Romano Christoph and Mike Monty, right?
Right.
And at the time, this is when there was like a lag when the Japanese sellers didn't realize that there's interest in this. So I would see what they want. Double target. Okay. And it would be like 500 yen, or sometimes you would just find it in a junk shop, because after all, you could just start to tell the same actors. But then like years later, I checked YouTube, and like they're showcasing their tapes, their VHS. I'm like, I sold them that tape. In fact, that case is not the original. I remember taking out some Disney movies, that I bought for 100 yen because I needed the case. Dumbo, goodbye. I need that big case. Put in Double Target, and like, so
and Korean tapes as well now.
But when I see them all lined up, it's like in Sweden, usually Sweden or someplace. It is fascinating, like aesthetically, the packaging. They look, the look of those VHS tapes. The way they were packaged and designed. So I can imagine getting that, the package coming from Japan, and sometimes you had to convert it to PAL or whatever it was. And
I've mentioned this to Nick several times, but like I used to just have boxes and boxes and boxes of these tapes because when I first arrived, it was 99. So the changeover, everyone was switching to DVD. Pick those things up for, 100 or something sometimes.
Yeah.
And fuck, if I still had them, I could retire quite comfortably.
Oh, man.
They're all in a landfill. Or at least I saved the sleeves. I saved the cover to illustrate my book. But otherwise, the tapes, bye-bye.
And the joke is they're probably, in terms of like lasting media, they're possibly better. So many DVDs seem to be now delaminating and all kinds of stuff. So the VHS still plays.
They're very sturdy. They're very sturdy, absolutely.
And now I look at the eBay auctions, like there's a sellers, if it's any Japanese tape, it starts at $70. And like they're not going to even sell it unless they get their price. It's like $70, $30 EMS shipping. And it's like there's always one person in the world, I need that tape.
And that's even like you don't even have to be obscure, right? That could be a Japanese tape of like
so it's like
Golden Child or Back to the Future or something.
Anything. So like sometimes I would select the collector ones, but then like Speed, and someone would buy it, but they would pay like $5. I would shipping was cheap, so you could put like 5 or 6 in a Sal package. So it was like $20 to ship 5 tapes. Sometimes you get 6 in. So amazing how like stuff that was worthless in one country, highly coveted around the world. That's always, and how it brings people together, like the whole collector, the trading, and friendships come out of that. So that's like something you don't have with like the streaming.
No, there's not really a community there. And
Yeah.
I can remember too, like when friends would obviously we'd be trading with each other, and I can also remember that they would always put amazing things on the end of the tape as well. Like, there's 2 minutes left, here, I'm going to put something totally bizarre on the end. And yeah, Steve Vai's greatest fan jumps to my mind as being one of the most outrageous. If you haven't seen it, well worth looking up Steve Vai's greatest fan. It was a tape sent to Steve Vai by a woman who demonstrates her talents, and I'll leave it at that. But I nearly broke a rib, hysterically laughing.
But I gotta bookmark this now.
She does have mad guitar skills. So anyway, we've strayed. I think we shall put a cap on it there.
Okay.
However, can I just jump in and say that Matt so kindly gave me the opportunity to mention Tomisaburo Wakayama, who there's 2 people I like to bring up every single episode to annoy Clive. One is Thomas Millian, who I have no reason to bring up now.
Doesn't usually
and the
stop
other one is
not having a reason.
No, it doesn't. No. But this time you brought up Bad News Bears Go to Japan, which is one of the few films that Wakayama Tomisaburo made outside of Japan, right? Fans will know him best as Lone Wolf.
Well, also anyway, Bad Karate as well. I was thinking is a link, right?
Oh yes, because he played that Chen Sun character in the Raizo Ichikawa movie, right?
Yeah.
Oh yes, but I'm thinking he plays the guy who hops about a lot, jumps up and down
in one of the
karate
eyes of death. And they talk
they
talk endlessly about how amazing his martial arts skills are, on and on and on, and then finally it just goes and it's just hysterically funny.
And possibly trampolining around as well.
Yeah. Anyway, yes.
So thanks.
Yes, thank you, Matt. In general, this has been a fun chat. I hope you enjoyed.
Okay. Yes, I did.
Okay. I think we're gonna have Matt on again for another show, actually, because he made a suggestion for another Japan themed triple bill. So I think we're gonna have him back on.
Oh yeah, Tokyo Pop.
Tokyo Pop, Death Ride to Osaka.
AKA Girls of the White Orchid with Jennifer Jason Leigh and
The Challenge.
The Challenge, yes. That's actually Scott Glenn and Toshiro Mifune, yes. Yeah.
So if you're up for that, that's not going to quite fit this format because this is things that are more difficult to find. But we can definitely do an episode of Yaki Sinitoba about those 3.
Definitely.
Yes. All right,
good. So we'll have Matt.
Okay. Is there a protocol to signing off so you don't just click?
Well, we can hang about and have a quick chat before the timer runs out. But in terms of the recording, just a bye-bye.
Okay, bye-bye.